Storyverse HQ.
There are some moments in life that don't look important when they happen. They don't come with warnings, they don't announce themselves. But later, you realize that was the moment everything ended. For me, it was just one sentence. You are becoming useless in this house. I remember standing there in the kitchen, my hand resting on the table, because suddenly my body felt heavier than it should. Not because of the words alone, but because they were not new. You see, a marriage doesn't break in one day. It breaks slowly, quietly, in places nobody sees. When I married him 26 years ago, he was not like this. He used to laugh. He used to sit close to me and talk about everything, dreams, plans, the future. We were not rich, but we were happy. I still remember our first kitchen. Small, hot, with just one gas burner that misbehaved most of the time. But he used to sit there while I cooked, teasing me, tasting the food before it was ready, calling me chef like it was a title I earned. Back then, love was simple. Then, life happened. Work became more demanding. Money started coming in. And slowly, he started changing. At first, it was small things. Late nights, office work, meetings, networking. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Until one night, he came home smelling like a perfume that was not mine. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I didn't say anything. Because I told myself, marriage is patience. That was the beginning of my silence. Years passed, and silence became my language. He stopped asking about my day, stopped noticing when I was tired, stopped seeing me completely. But I kept going. I cooked, I cleaned, I raised our children, I prayed for him. Even when he came home late, I would still warm his food. Even when he spoke to me like I was nothing, I would still answer softly. Not because I was weak, but because I believed I was holding a family together. There were nights I sat at the edge of the bed, watching him sleep, wondering when I became invisible in my own marriage. And still, I stayed. Then, my body started changing. At first, it was just tiredness, the kind you think sleep will fix. Then the weight started dropping. Clothes stopped fitting. Food lost its taste, even to me. I went to the hospital alone, sat there alone, listened to the doctor alone. Leukemia. I remember nodding, like I understood everything. But the truth is, I only understood one thing. I was dying. I walked out of that hospital and went home. And I didn't tell him. Not because I didn't need him, but because I already knew he wasn't there. Days turned into months, and I became smaller, weaker, quieter. But still, I cooked. I smiled. I pretended, because I didn't want the children to see the truth. I didn't want them to grow up thinking love looked like this. Then came that day. It started like every other day. I was in the kitchen, trying to cook. My hands were weak, my body was tired. Even standing felt like work. He tasted the food and dropped the spoon. And then he said it. You are becoming useless in this house. Look at you, thin like a broomstick. Even your food is tasteless now. Something inside me went quiet. Not broken, not shattered, just quiet. Because when pain becomes too much, it stops making noise. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't defend myself. I just held the table so I wouldn't fall. He got angry that I said nothing, picked his keys, slammed the door and left. And for the first time in 26 years, I didn't wait for him to come back. I walked slowly to the bedroom, sat on the floor, and looked around. At the life I built, at the home I held together, at the marriage I kept alive. alone. And I ask myself one question. How long will I keep dying like this, quietly? Because the truth is, I had already been dying. Not just from sickness, but from neglect, from silence, from being unseen. So, I made a decision. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of exhaustion. I wrote him a letter, not to blame him, but to finally tell the truth. I told him everything. The women, the insults, the nights I cried alone, the love I kept giving without receiving. And then I told him about the leukemia, how I had been fighting it alone, how I knew he wouldn't notice, how I knew he wouldn't ask. And as I wrote the final words, I realized something. I have been dying slowly in a house where nobody noticed. So I decided to stop dying slowly. If you are listening to this, listen carefully. Some people don't lose their marriages in court. They lose them in small moments, in careless words, in things they didn't think mattered. Sometimes the person beside you is fighting battles you never asked about. Sometimes they are breaking in silence. And sometimes, by the time you finally notice, it is too late. But to you, who is still alive, still breathing, still hurting, don't choose this ending. No man, no woman, no situation is worth your life. You are more than your pain, more than your situation, more than what someone failed to see in you. Stay, breathe, fight, live. Because even if one person failed to love you right, your life is still worth everything. And maybe today, you can choose to start again. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Storyverse HQ. Because here, we tell stories that matter.